What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Toast Hammer. Still feeling a bit under the weather, and this is still a pre-vacation recording, so again, no face cam for me. We're getting right into things with this painting process. Now, I already told you guys a whole lot about Norea Eng in our previous videos about her, so I thought I would dive a little bit into the painting process for this one because it was a little bit unconventional. Because of the structure of the model, I had to sort of paint the underside first before I could proceed with the rest of the build, because I knew those parts would be really hard to get to when I had her fully attached to the base. So I handled all of my base coats there, making sure everything was nice and clean, all the metallics were hit, but not bothering with highlights or anything at this point, just getting the base coats done, because eventually highlights are just going to be the parts you see and not the parts that you don't. So I'm not sweating it too much, just making everything relatively clean, at least enough to proceed. At this point, I'm able to pin her to the base, apply texture paste to the base, and then prime it. And we're ready to get into the painting as a whole. The first step, of course, is just base coating the rest of the model. Nothing super exciting here. So I thought I might wax philosophical about Norea Eng's position in our Dark Heresy campaign, which is why I am rushing to paint this model before we end up fighting her. If you don't know why that's happening, check out our previous video. But it turns out the Thousand Sons who we are combating against have their own Mechanicus ally, a techno-heretic named Faustus, who we've been on the trail of since basically day one of the campaign, but he's always been a couple steps ahead. Well, perhaps no longer. It turns out one of his former mentors was Norea Eng herself, and so we are going to her own planet to confront her and see what horrors await for all of us, and potentially we might all die. TBD, but she is... I made the character. She's pretty strong. we might be totally screwed. But we're going to her planet to try and find a lead on where Faustus is. We have an idea of his location for the first time in a very long time, but we don't know what awaits us when we get there. So we're trying to get some advanced intel so we can go in better prepared. So now that the base coating is done, I make sure I get all of the places that are a little bit hard to reach as well. And then we get into one of my favorite steps of the entire process, which is an oil wash. This is technically a part of my Mechanicus paint scheme, so we are going to go with the classic Streaking Grime. Now, this doesn't typically happen, or at least I haven't personally experienced it, where the mineral spirits will actually take away some of the acrylic paint layer. I may have been a little bit impatient waiting for it to dry, but I did actually get some paint stripping happening on this miniature. Luckily, in most places, it wasn't too egregious. But I think in the future I might want to make sure that the acrylic is fully cured before attempting this step, because again, as I've done it in previous models, which is pretty much every AdMech model I've made, I've never encountered this paint stripping before. But regardless, it's not too difficult to fix up. Just hit it with another layer of acrylic paint and you're pretty much good to go. You don't really need to reapply Streaking Grime after you fix these spots. None of them are so egregious that it's really noticeable after you correct them. And some of them can even be chalked up to natural weathering as well, so I just kind of left those spots in where it looked fine. Another main thing I wanted to do with this build was to define her character a little bit more. Now there's this giant piece of Necron technology sort of attached to her back, and I wanted to make that into Blackstone, which in the lore of 40k is known as both sort of a psychic dampening and also amplifying, stone of sort of Necron design that has been used in various applications throughout the universe. It's considered one of the most valuable materials that you can find in the 40k universe. And I thought it would be very cool for her to have integrated that into herself as usually a personal psychic dampener, since she is very volatile and unpredictable in her psychic strength, but occasionally as an amplifier when she needs it to be. So I thought that would be a very nice detail, so I start edge highlighting this piece of black rock with green in the traditional sense that you see on many Necron models. I'm going for a much more subtle effect this time, so I'm really only hitting those upwards facing edges and faces of the stone itself, just to get a nice sort of subtle green coloration to it. And then finally, after that, comes all of the basing and then the OSL, because there's a lot of glowy bits on her as well. And I've talked about OSL a whole lot on this channel. I'm using orange fluorescent paint on the light emitting sources over a white background, and then subtly covering the areas reflected onto whatever surface they are, using a less diluted orange on metallic surfaces and using a more diluted orange on things like fabric or other such materials. But overall, that's pretty much all there is to this paint job. So I'm going to get her out on a little turntable to get some glamour shots. I'm really happy with how this model turned out. I think it's one of my better kit bashes, and I really enjoy the final painted piece, and I'm really excited to see her on the Dark Heresy tabletop when we actually fight against her. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the Heretek. I very much hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. It always helps the video out. And if you had to stat out this monster for an RPG, what abilities do you think she should have? I am not a DM in this system at all, but, you know, give me some cool ideas in the comments below. And if you want to see more cool kit bashes, painting, lore, stuff like that, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single video. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace!